Good morning. I'm Joyce Tischler, and I'm your worship associate today. In today's service, we're going to be talking about our dreams and about setting goals that will bring our dreams to life. And I'd like to share my dream with you. I dream of a boring world. The world that we live in is far too exciting, and I crave a world that some would complain is boring. But for me, boring would be very, very welcome. I dream of a world in which, when I open my computer and see my online news, instead of reading about violent conflicts and terrible suffering in Ukraine and Sudan and Gaza or elsewhere, the news article is going to provide yet another story about some people having disagreements, and the town elder is working with them to bring a fair and just resolution. No violence, no people starving, no people being driven out of their homeland, just people sitting down together and working out their differences. What could be more boring than that? Or, instead of facing the mind-numbing terror that we have to fight tooth and nail to keep Donald Trump from ever entering the White House again, the lead story in the online news is that Dolores Hurd is knitting a 7-foot-tall gratitude statue, and it's going to be placed in the lobby of the Portland International Airport. I dream of a world in which everyone has nutritious, healthy food that comes from community gardens or our own gardens or traditional family farms where food is always grown locally and organically, a world in which the global food supply is not controlled by a handful of multinational corporations that are feeding us and our children processed chemical junk. Yes. I dream of a world in which we close down Dow, DuPont, Monsanto, and other corporations that are killing the planet for mindless, short-term profit. I dream of a world in which every human has a home that is indoors, where they feel safe and comfortable, and where every human has a guaranteed minimum income, and where prisons have been turned into colleges that don't charge tuition. Hey, it's my dream, right? I dream of a world in which non-human animals are not exploited, tortured, and killed to serve human convenience and the desire for profit. Now, I've always dreamed that the human species could move away from being selfish, power-hungry, and violent, that it can embrace the value of living and working together in peaceful ways and prize education, music, art, intellectual discussions, and creativity. Boring, boring, boring. So how do we change ourselves so that we can leave behind this exciting but rather ugly world that we are trapped in right now and commit to creating and maintaining a far more nurturing and livable world? How do we graduate from focusing only on advancing technology and material gain to focusing on advancing a wonderful quality of life for all? I say bring on boring. Dreaming is the wonderful, creative first step. Crafting dreams into reality is the harder part, but so worth doing.
The reading this morning comes from the book, The Way Toward Health by Jane Roberts. Many birds in their fantastic migrations demonstrate an amazing optimism, traveling thousands of miles to distant shores, almost literally flying by faith, as it were ignoring all dangers, unbesieged by doubts. There is no hesitancy but the sure flight. Birds do not question whether or not the weather will be favorable. the winds fair or foul. They simply fly toward their destination. Even if some birds do fall or die, this in no way impedes or undermines the faith of others. Monarch butterflies, in their remarkable migrations, often fly toward land that they have never seen themselves. And yet, they reach their destination. In all such cases, there is an inbred biological faith that courage and vitality, that biological optimism, it acts the same in people, triggering the necessary bodily reactions. Only when that optimism is severely tampered with do the physical mechanisms falter. Even then, however, all creatures are sustained by that innate gift, that inner sense of security that not only propels creatures towards life, but safely conducts them past physical life and past death's doorway. A few months ago, I was looking back over my life. I realized that for 11 years, from my late 20s and into my 30s, I was living alone, just as I'm doing now. I stopped to think about how my life was different then from the way it is now. Then I was working on my spiritual life, just as I'm doing now, pursuing deepening my connection to the divine. I worked a few days a week, had a wonderful circle of friends and family, just as I do now. Then I traveled to portray Margaret Sanger in my one-woman show, and now I travel to preach. Life has come full circle, almost. So outside of being older, with a lot of job experience and experience in living, what's changed? I remember that in the before times, before moving to Los Angeles and adding a husband, a mortgage, stepsons, before aging parents and sickness and death, I spent a fair amount of time thinking about what my life was going to look like in the future. Having my whole future in front of me was an exciting prospect. I had plans, big plans. I would visualize different scenarios, moving to Los Angeles, working on stage there, meeting my future husband, building a home, having a good circle of friends, traveling. Some of my dreams were pedestrian, the ones we all have. Some were more exotic. I dreamed of working in the film industry, and that happened, although peripherally. I wanted to perform on stage there, and I did, but in roles I had never thought of. Finding a life partner, which I did when I traveled to Yosemite, an unlikely place to meet, to be sure. All the things I dreamed of came true, but not exactly in the detail I saw them, but they all happened. So why did I stop dreaming big and making things happen? Well, life. Yeah, you know, moving for new jobs, moving because the house you rented was sold, companies closing or restructuring that meant you needed to find new work, then finding out your skills are not updated enough, cars breaking down, needing to find money for a new one, sickness of family, and death of friends and loved ones. Just as Marcia talked last week about how easy it is to become homeless, we were never in that situation, but I can see now how close we came to that in our early days together, and how we managed to avoid it just by a stroke of luck and a lot of people who believed in us. And now there's enough distance for me to really look at it honestly, and I can see that sometimes my bad planning or lack of planning added to what could have been a better situation. But somehow, even when life became sad, frightening, or tragic, I usually had an overwhelming optimism that it was all going to work out. Like the migratory butterflies, I knew I was traveling to a land I had never seen, but knew I was somehow going to get where I needed to be. And frankly, I was going to end up somewhere if I was still living, but I never doubted that wherever that was, it was going to be okay. Where does that optimism come from? Are we born with it, inherit it, or do we choose it? My father, on a night out with my mother, before that night, he would say, "We are going to have the best time tonight." And the next day, he would excitedly tell me what had happened and how much they'd enjoyed the evening. Did he make it so with his attitude? Just as my mother, being raised by her pessimistic, dour aunt and uncle, was determined to see the best in everyone every day. Why do we stop dreaming and making plans? Do we forget how? I remember my sister telling me of a conversation with my mother many years ago when I was pursuing work as a professional actress. She asked my sister, when was I going to give up that little girl dream? By this time I was in my 30s, and my sister told her, "Face it, never." I know that she was trying to protect me from getting hurt, but there was something else there. She and my father had weathered the Depression and World War II, both of which shook and haunted them and affected the psyche of this country and everyone in it. They knew what hard work was and how uncertain the future was. Maybe my cockeyed optimism was a pushback against that. But what would happen if I went back to my old belief that I had my whole future ahead of me and acted like that every day? I know that people will tell you to live each day like it's your last, but I don't think they meant not to make plans or to not have an excitement for what's to come. Can you still plan for exciting new things in your life and live each day to the fullest? Now, I know that if you've lost your mobility, or if you feel as though you need to leave your home and move into assisted living, life can seem narrow and sad. It can also be overwhelming if you lost your job or are underemployed and you're suffering food insecurity. But what can you do now with the circumstances you're in? Some say that your 60s, 70s, and 80s can be the most fulfilling and productive. Just look at President Biden. And what if your present circumstances make it so that you can't even think about tomorrow and you're just exhausted getting through today? I know that my life has come with a lot of privilege. I'm white, educated, and although I've achieved a lot, my family was poor. My mother said that none of her relatives had a lot of money, but she'd never seen real poverty until she met my dad's family. Luckily, imagination is free. Sometimes it was tough to hang on to, but I'm pretty stubborn. I hate being told no, and somewhere the feisty arises out of me. Maybe it's from the pioneer stock on my dad's side, the grandfather and great-uncle who walked from Iowa to Nebraska in the 1880s looking for good farmland, or the Irish ancestors that were starving and left for America. I stand on their shoulders. They had dreams too. So how do we reclaim ours? My dreams are different now. I no longer need to walk on a stage to create a new character. I'm more invested and interested in creating a better me. When I examine how I managed to build these dreams in the past, I remember it being very detailed in their construction. As Lily Tomlin said, "All my life I always wanted to be somebody. Now I see that I should have been more specific." She's right. You have to define your dream in detail as specifically as you can. You want a home? How many rooms? Square feet, style, ocean view? Really see it. Decorate it in your mind. When I wanted a life partner, I knew I wanted a good man with an education, a great sense of humor, and someone who could fix things. Bob was all those things, and a man who was an artist when it came to building cabinets or laying tile. But as Lily said, I should have been more specific. He was a Vietnam veteran with a lot of PTSD. You don't think of the problems or challenges, you always just think about the possibilities. That's what living gives you. Experience when you don't read the fine print. So I know that it's not always roses, but planning gives me hope. And I know that hope is not always easy to find. If you can find one thing today that you can look forward to, tomorrow it may be two. I can understand if it was a major accomplishment for you to get here today. But you're here, and try to remember that when you can't find hope, when life seems dark, come here. Your church stands with you. But what does it cost me not to dream? How much of my journey is limited by my thoughts and beliefs about what is possible? For me, it's life-limiting thought and practice. When I start doubting myself, I make it almost impossible to see the way ahead. If a door closes for me, I have to find another way. If, after several tries, I find it's not possible, I realize it was not for me, and I need to find a new trajectory for myself. But I've made it a practice to dream about what is coming for me every day now, and with that, I find I am more joyful and content. I leave you this morning with the poem, September, by Jennifer Michael Hecht. Tonight, there must be people who are getting what they want. I let my oars fall into the water. Good for them. Good for them, getting what they want. The night is so still that I forget to breathe. The dark air is getting colder. Birds are leaving. Tonight, there are people getting just what they need. The air is so still that it seems to stop my heart. I remember you in a black and white photograph taken this time of some year. You were leaning against a half-shed tree, standing in leaves the tree had lost. When I finally exhale, it takes forever to be over. Tonight, there are people who are so happy that they have forgotten to worry about tomorrow. Somewhere, people have entirely forgotten about tomorrow. My hand trails in the water. I should not have dropped those oars. Such a soft wind. Amen, and may it be so.